Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli back out in the shop with a brand new video for you today. And in today's shop, we're going to be doing a little more theory-based discussion, and we're going to be talking about catching bass in rivers, river bass fishing. I'm going to go over it in a really general, broad manner, so no matter what kind of river you're fishing, no matter what the season, all this stuff is going to apply. River fishing happens to be fresh on my mind right now because I actually just got back from a river tournament kayak event on the upper Susquehanna River. So, let's start by talking about rivers. And I want to stress that even though there are differences, there's a lot of similarities, right? So a river could be a big meandering, non-tidal natural river, right? Like the Susquehanna. It could be a tidal river with actual tidal fluctuations. It could be the headwaters of a reservoir, right? The upper end of a reservoir, the rivers that feed the lake, they're all going to kind of lay out the same, right? You've got, a windy kind of system with straightaways and bends. And most importantly, you have current. And, current is the real key to how to catch bass in rivers. So I want to break down just a couple of the key aspects. Let's start with number one. And this is a really universal fact. This is so universal, you can use it on any river you fish, anywhere, any time of the year, for any species of bass, including shoal bass, swanee bass, anything, spots, smallmouth, largemouth. This really does translate across the board. And it is the fact that bass will always relate to some kind of current break. Something that breaks the ultra swift current and creates a line or an eddy of slower water. And, when you talk about that current eddy, there's some things that are real obvious and some places that are real obvious that those fish will be. And then there's a couple little sneaky things that the fish will do in those eddies, okay? So in its purest form, when current hits something, okay, that could be a boulder. It could be the front of an island. It could be a log sticking out. It could be a point of land, something that breaks the flow of that current. It's going to hit, and as it hit, it deflects and creates a seam, okay? It creates a seam. When you're looking at that seam, everything down current to the right of that seam is in the heavy current flow. Everything down current and left of that seam is in the eddy, is in the calm area of that current flow. And fish use that to set up and feed, right? It's a no-brainer to think about it like a wash, like a flush, right? They don't want to be fighting that current all the time to eventually get that one little minnow. They want to be kind of protected and hidden and not, not fighting the current, resting, waiting for that minnow to come past, right? So that line, that current seam in itself is a very key spot. The slack water area in that current seam can also be very important. A lot of times fish that are resting or fish that are sort of waiting will be in that dead calm spot of that eddy as well, right? So the seam, the calm area of the eddy, now the backflow, okay? So as that current hits that object, creates the seam, downstream to the right is fast flow, downstream to the left is eddy and calm water. At some point, the current will want to backflow, and when it does that, it creates suction, and you'll often find current moving the other way on whatever object that current's hitting. So you'll see a reverse flow on whatever that target is. If it's a point of an island, a boulder, a dock, a rock, you'll see a reverse current flow on that area. And they will get in that as well. All right, last but not least on these current areas, and this is one that is so tricky, I missed it for years. I missed it for years and years. And it is the contact point of that current hitting something. And so a lot of times when you look at it, you're going to see an area that has a lot of debris built up, right? Current's been flowing. It's bringing down with it bits of grass, sometimes algae, sometimes pollen, sometimes trash, whatever it is. And you see this mat right where it hits that object and cuts off. And when you look at that spot, the current hit, where it hits that object, it appears that that current is at its fastest right there. But when that current hits that spot, it actually creates a soft spot in the current. And there are a lot of fish that will be in that hit point of the current, okay? Where the current hits the object, although it looks fast to you and you're thinking there's no way a fish could be there, you cast there and catch 2, 3 fish sometimes on that spot because there is a little bit of soft water as it hits. So never forget about the front of the target as well, okay? So current seam, the eddy, the slack water, the backwater eddy that's reversing, and the front of the target, the soft push point, are all great areas in rivers to fish, right? Current is so key. That's how they feed. Outside of the spawn and outside of when they winter, fish always want to be near current, okay? Their life revolves around current because that's where the food is being flushed to those fish. All right. Next thing I want to talk about, another universal fact in river fishing, is where fish will position in relation to the bank and in relation to cover targets, depending on the level of the river, okay? Just like current and eddies and seams, this is going to be universal, right? So if you fish a natural river, like the upper Susquehanna, if you fish a tidal river, you're going to experience this. And even if you fish a man-made reservoir with rivers that come into that system, you're going to experience this. And it is rivers that are rising water, or rivers that are falling, okay? So, listen, in natural rivers, you have rain that affects that. In tidal rivers, you have tide that will do that, will affect that. And last but not least, in reservoirs, you have a dam at the bottom end of the lake. And when they close the dam after a rain, you're going to get river levels that rise. If they want to get rid of water, they flip a switch at the dam, open up the turbines, and the water releases, okay? So rivers, you have water that's sometimes rising and water sometimes that's falling, okay? And I want to address that. So rising water in rivers will always create a movement of fish up and shallow. And it's why this thing is so important, guys. When you're fishing rivers, I always keep this with me because I'm looking at predictions. I'm looking at dam flow predictions, how that gate's going to operate. I'm looking at rainfall. I'm looking at all that stuff to try to gauge what the level that river's doing. But when I have rising water in a river, fish know. Fish, again, every species, largemouth, smallmouth, spots, they know, they feel the rise. And when the fish in a river feel the rise, they want to push shallow. So that means the bank targets are going to get really good. Islands that have grass on them. Maybe grass that's not even normally flooded or normally maybe only has inches of water. As that water starts to rise, those fish want to push shallow. And I'm talking about big fish. So my favorite time to catch big fish in a river, especially a natural river, is during the rise, okay? So rising water, fish moving shallow, pushing into the cover, pushing toward the bank. But then the opposite is true when you have falling river water. Falling river water. And when the river water's falling, the opposite happens to those bass, which is they sense it. Like literally, guys, if you're watching your gauge and you see, oh my gosh, the current, the water level has stabilized and they're predicting in an hour it's going to start falling. The second they feel it falling, the millisecond they feel the decline in water, right? The water going away. They want to escape that shallow water. They want to get away from the flooded stuff. They want to move away from the banks and the islands. So that falling water pushes those fish out. The opposite way, which is out. So on falling water conditions in a river, instead of looking up and in, right? Up toward the bank and up in the grass and in the cover. Now I'm going to be turning my back to that and I'm looking out at targets and objects that break the current that are out in the main river itself, in the main flow, right? Because generally as that water falls, the current also slows up. Remember, river fishing, except for the spawn, it's all about food. So as the water starts to fall, the minnows, the bait, everything they're feeding on, they don't want to be stranded high and dry either. So the food moves out and the bass move out. So then I start looking for targets that are away from the bank, away from the islands, right? Mid-river boulders. A log that sits out in the river. Not a log on the bank, or a log that sits out. I start looking at the ledges, the drops, out off the bank, right? Falling water, fish compressing out toward the middle of the river. So another universal fact about river fishing, current, absolutely key. Rising and falling water, absolutely key. And the last thing I want to talk to you about river fishing is my opinion on the way to fish a river whenever you can, and it is fishing upcurrent. Upcurrent. And I don't care, guys, if I'm fishing, in my bass boat in the tidal body of water, or if I'm in my kayak in a natural river. I always want to be casting upstream and letting that bait, that lure, come back naturally. Even if I'm going downriver, I want my presentation, I want my cast to be upstream or upcurrent, right? Think about that. If you're fishing a lure, let's say a vibrating jig. Let's just, for argument's sake, let's talk about here we have a chatterbait. This is just a run-of-the-mill half-ounce chatterbait. I got a little Berkeley power swimmer on the back. Looks like a bluegill. I'm fishing a chatterbait. If I cast downstream and reel it up, it's a very unnatural movement, right? Those bait fish you're trying to imitate, or those bluegill or crawfish, they don't like to move against the swift current, right? They don't like to move upstream. They're not salmon spawning. They're just it's just forage. So I'm always conscious of casting upstream and presenting that bait as it's coming down. Whether it's a weightless plastic or a topwater or a chatterbait or a crankbait or anything, tube, whatever. I want to cast upstream and let that lure come back naturally in the current. So preferred method, even if I'm going downstream, I want to make the presentation upstream, if that makes sense. Another universal fact for rivers. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. Felt right to do a real general shop on river fishing and those three facets. I utilize them all the time in kayak fishing, in big boat fishing, and it helps me catch more fish. If you like what you're hearing, if you like these shop videos, stop right now, hit the subscribe button. You see it down there flashing. Subscribe to my channel. When you do that, we're going to send you a notification on every new piece of content dropping. And you know when that happens? Happens once a week. If you're already subscribed, tell your friends about Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube. Hopefully we'll help you become a better angler. We'll see you at the next one. Bye. Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli out in the shop. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, you have to check out that one, and I hope you like them.